So I knew for a while that I wanted to have my next guest on the podcast. I was reading his stuff and watching his videos and really enjoying his content and trying to figure out, what's the angle that we want to do on this podcast. I've done 400 episodes between this and Mastering Midlife. So what can Jeffrey and I do that's going to be different? Meanwhile, we connected on social media, and Jeffrey wrote a post, and he wrote a post about having a lifestyle business. Now, you got to understand, he's the real deal. He's the guy who lived it, has been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. So he's created his own lifestyle business and helped people do that. But I didn't really know all that at the time. So I made a little comment about, I think the question that he asked was, what is your definition of a lifestyle business? And I, being the flippant person that I am, and that that I do kind of get myself in trouble with my mouth sometimes, I said, oh, it's a mythical creature that is made up by life coaches. To which Jeffrey, the professional, responded, I don't see it that way. And then, of course, when you go through all his content, you know that that's what he does all day, every day with people. So officially, Jeffrey Shaw started selling eggs door to door at 14 years old, which began a lifetime of self-employment. So this guy knows what he's talking about. He provides self-employment and small business owners with a personal development strategies they need to create the business and life of their dreams, right? Obviously. Drawing on his experience as a renowned portrait photographer, Jeffrey shows business owners how to see business through a different lens and strategies to compose the often chaotic pieces of life and business into sustainable success, which is one of my favorite words, sustainable success. That's what we're trying to create. He's a keynote speaker. He's a TEDx speaker. He's the host of the Self-Employed Life podcast. He's the author of The Self-Employed Life, Business and Personal Development Strategies to Create Sustainable Success. So he's the real deal. Jeffrey, thank you for being here.
Mark, I'm so excited for this conversation, and I'm glad we connect. Regardless of how it happened, I'm glad we connected on social.
Yeah, it was just cool because it gave me spice to have, like, a little bit of an edge to have to this conversation, because I am dubious. I'm a little dubious when coaches talk about having a lifestyle business. I remember when I was, becoming a coach, nobody told me when I was becoming a coach that I was becoming an entrepreneur. Right. So I left corporate world where they were paying for my American Express. They were paying for my health insurance and all that. And I came into the world of entrepreneurship. So I really wasn't prepared. And when I hear life coaches saying, oh, you can just build the life of your dreams, I think they forget a few things. And going through your content, it's like, you don't forget anything. You know how to architect this. So what is a lifestyle business?
Yeah. I'm glad you responded the way you did, because I was putting it out there because I'm fully aware there's a derogatory sense about lifestyle business, which has me baffled, especially today. Now, mind you, as a guy, my first book is called Lingo. I'm very focused on the energy and power of words. I think we often forget how powerful words are. And this idea, and at the same time, recognizing words are meant to change. The meaning of words are meant to change, right? So lifestyle business has had a derogatory attachment to it. I did an interview with, and I don't mind naming names in this case, I did an interview years ago with Michael Gerber, famous for writing E-Myth. And it was kind of a disastrous interview, like one that I thought about not even broadcasting, because he and I got in an argument about lifestyle business, because he flat out said, if you're not building a business to sell it, you're not even an entrepreneur. And I'm like, how could you say that, Michael? He goes, because you're not serious. You're just making a job for yourself. And to which my response was, and what the hell is wrong with that? Like, is there anything more noble than creating a business that provides you and your family with a livelihood? You're not living off of any social programs, which, hey, if you have to, you have to, but you're sustaining your life. Like, what's more honorable than that? Why does it have to be you have employees or that you're building it to sell? So this was years ago. So this idea of lifestyle business has just nagged on me as to why it has such a negative connotation to it. So I expected a mix of responses when I put that out there, but here's, Mark, why I believe this needs to change. Right now, we have the Great Resignation, millions of people leaving their jobs. Why are they leaving their jobs? I think the media has it wrong. It's not about the big quit. It's about what people are walking towards. What they're walking towards is living the life they want. If they're starting businesses, that to me is a lifestyle business. A lifestyle business doesn't mean you're selling pretty home products. A lifestyle business is that, to me, my definition is that you're building a business that supports the lifestyle you want to live, which has been the only way I have ever been in business. I live in Miami because I came down here 6 years ago for 3 months. I fell in love with the lifestyle. I bent my business to fit the lifestyle I want, which is how I've made every business decision in my life. How do I want to live? How do I make the business work for me instead of me working for the business? That's a lifestyle business. You're running a business that's creating the lifestyle you want. And I don't understand why there's shame about that.
And you didn't do it in a vacuum. You have 3 children, right? So you
Yes,
have responsibilities. It's not like
exactly.
you have a backpack and
Good point. I forget that
right?
sometimes.
Right. So
Absolutely.
you needed health insurance. You
Yeah.
needed to save for college, right? We have things that we have to do. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Now, it's funny when I made that comment, it's funny because I kind of crashed and burned when I went from corporate to running my own business and trying to figure all that out. But I have a lifestyle business. I just got back from Israel visiting my son, right? And I was able to do my business while I was visiting there. I'm going to scuba diving this weekend, in Key West. So, and I have a couple of hours where I need to do some work, right? And work with my clients. So I have a lifestyle business. I know it can be done. So let's start talking about, first of all, talk to me about people leaving regular, typical jobs, corporate jobs, where you're getting a paycheck and you're working for someone else and moving into entrepreneurship. What are your warnings? What are your signposts that you have people look for about whether or not they can make it out in the waters here?
Yeah. So the fun thing for me is that that's never been my experience. And that's kind of unusual. Most often we're coaching from a place of experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've never received a paycheck from anybody. I've never had a job. I've never had a traditional job. And yet that my one-to-one clients who are investing the greatest amount of money to work with me individually, they're all people, and that's intentional on my part.
Sure of it.
They're all people that are leaving corporate because that's who I happen to love to help, because I feel like I know the other side really well. My biggest forewarning, if you will, as you had put it, is, I mean, there's so many complicated issues with it, but to me, the thing I put up front is, have they really gotten clear on the business they're building and the idea behind it and the ability to communicate it? Because everything else, because there's so many things. Lack of structure throws a lot of, not having a structured workday throws a lot of corporate folks off.
I've said many times that I really could use an asshole sales manager.
Yeah,
I really miss having an asshole sales manager.
Right. And having the department with all the technology you need instead of bootstrapping, right? There's all those changes, which are very real. But the number one, I would say that, you have to be ready to jump right in. And the fastest way of doing that is people have to understand really clearly what it is that you're offering or selling. For them to understand it, you have to understand it. So unfortunately, I think the biggest challenge for most people is they come out of corporate and they just haven't quite grounded themselves in exactly what they're going to be doing, how they're going to say it, which slows down the process. Business by nature is iterative. It's going to be, and there will always be iterative process. The problem is people come out a little too green and they're not ready enough to actually be able to jump right into getting business. So there's too long of a gap. Like you said, crash and burn. You just don't want there to be too long of a gap between the income you've left behind and the income that you're recovering.
Do you think people who know what they're in for starting a business do better? Or do you think people like me who didn't know what they were in for becoming an entrepreneur, but had the grit? Because I don't think I would have done it had I know what I was in for the first few years as far as financially. So I'm glad I didn't know. Kind of like having kids, I didn't know how hard it would be.
Exactly.
Thank God.
It's
a
great
kids.
Comparison. Yeah.
What do you think is better, like being over prepared or diving in and figuring it out as you go?
I almost don't think it matters, because I don't think, even if you think you don't. Right. I mean, might be more prepared. The reason I wrote my book, The Self-Employed Life, was because I got this every time I asked somebody why they became self-employed, I got the exact same answer. Everybody said, "Oh, why'd you become self-employed? Why'd you start a business?" "Oh, I wanted to control my destiny. I wanted to control my future, or I wanted to control the hours that I work." And I look at them and say, so how's that going for you?
Right.
Right. So I don't care how much you think you know, you're not prepared for the fact that it's a false notion that you're going to have any control when you own your own business. Because why? The circumstances around us are uncontrollable. Economies go up and down. Pandemics come along, we now know. Who knew that a few years ago, right? So there's so many other circumstances. That's why I wrote the book, because I became keenly aware that everybody had the same false notion going into business. But I also realized I had as good of a solution to the problem as anybody I knew had a solution to the problem. And that's why I wrote the book. I was like, well, let me give everybody my solution. My solution is what I call the self-employed ecosystem, which is a 3-element ecosystem of personal development, business strategies, and daily habits. Because in my self-employed experience, if any one of those elements is off, the whole thing's not working. Doesn't mean your business is going to, it can go under, but the biggest problem is that I can guarantee anybody that doesn't have all 3 cylinders operating perfectly that you're working harder than you need to. And that's a core problem I see in the world of entrepreneurship, is that those gurus that are promising the lifestyle of your dreams, I totally get why you had a false notion around that, because there's a lot of bozo gurus out there. That's why you have to dig deep and say, is this person I'm about to hire or listening to the real deal? Even if they're saying the same thing, are they the real deal? And the problem is that we're given all these action steps. People just keep pounding away, adding more things to the to-do list. The next social. Now people are thinking, oh, great, I have to figure out how to find time to get on TikTok, right? We just keep piling more stuff on, and we're wondering, why is it that I'm working harder, but I'm hardly getting ahead? I'm not getting anywhere.
So let me wind you back, because you talked about your 3 steps to sustainable success. You talked about those pillars. Can you slow that down a little bit and talk about those 3 things so that we can all digest what you're talking about?
Yeah. So let's start with personal development, because this is the answer to working really hard and hardly getting ahead. And I actually have an assessment, and I can make that available for your listeners. We created an assessment.
I actually have it up on my laptop right now.
Awesome.
So that'll be your assessment and your workbuk are going to be in the show notes.
Yeah. And the assessment gives you results. So, and it's explained by, these are the symptoms. And if these are your symptoms, this is the answer. This is the solution. If your symptom is you feel like you're running on a hamster wheel, you feel like you're working really hard, hardly getting ahead, the reason for that is you haven't done a sufficient amount of personal development. Why? Because personal development, when you're self-employed, your level of success is proportionate to your level of personal development. You can't expect to be more successful than you believe you're capable of. We inherently have a ceiling on the top of our heads. Like, I believe no matter how big and bold your dreams are of how big of a deal you could become or how much money you can make, by having set it as an expectation, you've just put a ceiling on it, because expectations by nature, by definition, are a predetermined outcome. So I don't care how big the expectation is, you've determined how far you can go. So your level of success will only go as far as you really step into believing you're capable of. And I'll add to that, which I think is probably the biggest obstacle for more people, is how much you think you deserve. But I call it the deserving ceiling, because I literally have seen people pull back their success. They move ahead, they pull it back, they screw it up somehow. They move ahead, they pull it back, because they just don't feel like they deserve it. And I find this particularly true of people that came from, more challenging upbringing, and they by far surpassed their upbringing and maybe even their family. Mm-hmm. So they themselves have worked so hard to elevate themselves out of a situation. But when they get themselves out of the situation, they're dealing with this feeling that they're not sure if they deserve it, whether they're conscious of it or not, and they keep pulling themselves back.
It's definitely out of the comfort zone, because that's been that was me. I'm probably the most financially successful, right? In my family, both my parents didn't have even high school educations, right? Mm-hmm. So I grew up fairly poor, right? So when I became successful, there's been several times where I've been really successful, and it was too uncomfortable, pulled it back. And it's only in hindsight that I see that that's what was going on.
Correct.
But it really is working on our mindsets and our inner beliefs is the rocket fuel to our actions.
It is. I mean, so personal development, that's why it's the first and really main element of the business success you want. And this is what makes my both of my books kind of unique, because they're very practical business strategies, but written from the perspective of a coach who knows, as you do, that we have to develop the person to make the business go further. So personal development, that's a big part of the element. That's where we focus on that. How do we increase the person's capacity? How do we, I look at it as capacity, deserving ceiling, what you're capable of. Like, how do we increase the capacity so that all the hard work you put in kind of has a place to go? Okay, it fits in. The second element is business strategies. Business strategies, this is your action step. Now, I rarely have to tell an entrepreneur to work harder. That's usually not the issue. The problem is that they may be, if they're not getting the results they want, they're likely not doing what I refer to as right size strategies. Okay, so most entrepreneurs, we're businesses of one, we're small teams, or our team is entirely remote or virtual. What's exemplified outside of our own businesses are businesses much bigger than our own. So I actually did a social media post on this one day that I think one of the most exhausting parts of being a one-person business is constantly translating the rest of the world into a way that it fits for you. Right? So for example, globally, you could say most businesses are transactional based. But when you're self-employed, your business is almost entirely relationship based. But what we see are transactional measures. And I'll give a very specific example I think a lot of people can relate to. How often have you seen a cable company, some kind of, some bigger company offer a great deal to new customers only?
Right.
If you're a relationship-based business, or business based on deepening relationships, getting referrals, that's the worst thing you can do. Instead, you actually have to flip it. Like what I recommend, I encourage businesses to have some kind of a program within your business that your existing customers get rewarded for. That is not even a marketing ploy. It's not something you market. It's something they find. It's like an exclusive club that they become a part of. It's a discount that they might get once they become a client, but it's not even used for marketing. You're not using it to entice people. It's the reward that they find. That means in a relationship business, you're honoring their business that they're providing to you. Right. So that's right size is about translating the rest of the world, making sure it feels relationship based, as your business likely is when you're self-employed. It's taking the best of ideas. Some of my best marketing ideas undoubtedly have come from Starbucks and much bigger companies, but then turning them into something that works for my size business. Okay. Business strategy, one of the main business strategies I lightly touch on in the book. I almost wish I could have gone deeper, but it became much deeper once I launched the Self-Employed Business Institute, and the heart of the curriculum became what I call hug marketing. Hug marketing is my answer to what most people refer to as marketing funnels. But and I think many, the thousands of people I've met over the years of speaking, a lot of people, particularly small businesses, are uncomfortable with marketing funnels in the traditional form, because they include, hooks and tripwires and all this stuff. As I said to you earlier, like I'm
in the middle of building it. So
yeah.
I want to serve people as best I can. I don't want to be playing with this stuff.
Correct. I mean, the fact that in business, we call our audience a target market says a lot. Like, pay attention to the words. And we don't even use, in my business, we don't call it a marketing plan. We call it an enrolling plan. Like, what's our plan to enroll people into our world? Not to market at them, market to them, or target them, God forbid. Like, you got to pay attention to the actual energy of the words you're using. And that's the problem, because in much bigger businesses, they can refer to their audience as a target. We feel targeted as a consumer and everybody goes on with their life. But in a self-employed business, you don't want to make people feel targeted. So I turned that whole concept into what I call hug marketing. Hug marketing is a very specific strategy, as I teach it in my business institute, of taking people one step inward. It's a series of concentric circles. The outermost circle are lurkers, right? So lurkers are people that are watching you on social media, That's why I noticed. Like I saw your name coming up on my social media. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is right now, but I'm recognizing the name, right? So to me, you became a lurker. So now my responsibility is how do I turn this lurker into somebody what do I say, what do I do to behave in a way that he takes another step in and becomes curious? And then if he becomes curious, maybe he'll want to engage. And if he becomes engaged, maybe he'll want to connect. Maybe if he connects, he'll become a client, right? So it's a series of, and here we are, we're talking on your podcast.
Right.
Right.
Brilliant.
So
right. Absolutely brilliant.
It's right. And it's called hug marketing because the goal is a hug, not even to get a client. The client getting client acquisition is the second inner ring. And that's often the goal for most people. My goal is to turn the clients into my greatest advocates, sources of referrals, and loyal customers. People that if I were to see them in person, I can't imagine not giving them a hug. Mm-hmm. And that's why I call it hug marketing. The goal is to develop a client base that is so solid and intimate that you can't imagine not giving them a hug when you meet them. So that's what I mean by all these business strategies that feel entirely different than what we've been taught, because they're strategies that actually feel good for a self-employed person. Last element is the daily habits. We can go over this a little lighter. This is where the sustainability comes in, because the reason we go up and down when we're self-employed is that we don't have a steady mindset. We're thrown so easily. The easiest way to get a steady mindset is to have daily habits that you devote 15 to 17 minutes a day to practice a couple of things. And I refer to it as a clearing practice, meditation, something like that. And then what I teach very specifically is what's called a what's going right journal. And I have my clients journal. It's different than a gratitude journal. Gratitude is a great concept, but in my opinion, gratitude is so broad that I can't do anything with it. I'm grateful if I'm breathing and my kids are healthy, right? What do I do with that? It's so broad. The what's going right journal is a process of journaling what you are seeing that's going right in your life, and keep listening. What's going right is.
I like that distinction from the gratitude. Yep. I do.
It's a totally different process, because then you are singling out through observation what is going right. And the cool thing about it, Mark, is the harder things are in your life, the harder it is to see what's going right, is the more you need to do it.
Absolutely. The more you need to force your pen onto the paper.
And it's working with science, because what we know, whether it's science or spiritually, what we know is more that we focus on, we get more of. You start focusing on what's going right, you're going to start seeing more of what's going right. This has been a game changer in my life and in many other people's lives. And that's what I mean by a daily habit. You do that every day, you're going to have a mindset and emotional stability that will help you weather out the ups and downs of entrepreneurship.
Right. And the things that over and over, and every business strategy guru guy who's worth their salt, they'll be like, I think it's James Clear who says we don't succeed to the level of our motivations and our intentions. We fail to the level of our systems, right? Like, so if our systems, our daily habits aren't there, we're not going to do it. We have to be able to do things regardless of how we feel.
Yep. 100%. You got it right. Yeah.
So I hear a lot of metaphysical background in what you're talking about. There's a lot of, intangible things outside of business strategy. What's kind of your background? What kind of fed your soul that kind of surrounds your strategies with this hug?
Love that you're asking that, because it's forcing me to think it through, and I love that you're making me think, because I don't follow a particular religion. Spirituality has always been, it's just there. Like I have a sense that there's something bigger at play than me. I just choose, and it is my choice to not identify it as anything. It's just a general sense. I'm like, I kind of sense this is not all weight on my shoulders. Like, and I can't say that I define that as a predetermined fate. It's just an overall feeling that there's an energy at play.
Sure.
And I've learned to play with it in a way that's advantageous to my business.
Sure. But you're talking about doing self-inquiry about your inner beliefs, right? So where did you go to learn how to actually look at what's going on inside the clock?
So from a very young age, I would save up what little allowance, and it's not like you and I kind of grew up similarly, so there wasn't a lot of money there. But whatever little allowance I got, I would save up and I'd buy like Wayne Dwyer books. Like I was always reading self-help and hiding them because my family would think I was an absolute freak if they saw me reading self-help books. So I've always been curious about what
I'd
makes me
read
tick.
Diary of a Yogi in high school.
Yeah, and to that point, and sometimes I even forget to mention. I mean, part of the reason was that I was a super shy kid, really like paralyzing shyness. The world scared me. The idea of living and being out in the world scared me. So I just was trying to develop myself to be more than what I thought I was capable of. Although deep down, I thought I was pretty awesome, but I also was reflecting on what seemed to be the world thought of me. The messages around me was that I wasn't worth much, even though deep down I kind of felt like I was worth something and act likely to become something. Even though the messages around me weren't so positive. So I was trying to break down that barrier. I tell a story in my book about reading a book about self-hypnosis to try to hypnotize myself out of shyness, which went terribly wrong, by the way. But that interest has always been there. And then in my later years in adulthood, I've studied Buddhism for a lot of years. And what brought me into studying Buddhism originally, because again, that's just the way my brain works. I was in a bookstore and on the shelf was a book called The Diamond Cutter. And it was Buddha's perspective on business. And I'm like, I grew up Catholic. I'm like, leave it to Buddhism to actually have a business book. Like Catholicism wouldn't have that, or wouldn't, that I'm aware of. But I love the Buddhist perspective on business. So I bought this book. It changed my life because I love the concepts and principles of the book. And the book ended with an option to reach out to this organization to be aligned with a business coach. Now, this is in 1999. Business coaching wasn't that popular.
Racking my brains for the author of The Diamond Cutter.
Geisha Michael Roach. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I ended up having quite a relationship with him in different ways, but then his whole life went way amok. We don't even want to go there. Somebody who just went a little too deep into the unknown.
I've known quite a few pretty profound people who have just, like that's not an automatic entree into a great life.
Yeah, no, he just went too far and yeah, we don't even go there. But the Diamond Cutter at the end of the book was this option to reach out to this organization called Diamond Mountain, or it was the Enlightened Business Institute, and find out about business coaching. I knew nothing about business coaching in 1999. It wasn't popular, but that aligned me. I was interviewed. They aligned me with a business coach. I worked with that as my first business coach in 1999. I worked with him 3 times a month for 7 years.
Wow.
Right. That was my entrance into business coaching. And I realized this is life-changing when you're a business owner, because it is lonely at the top. Right. At that point in my career, I was achieved all beyond my goals like I ever could have imagined as a high-end portrait photographer to the super affluent. I had achieved all my goals at that point in life, but found it incredibly lonely. And having a business coach to be a thinking partner, to share the experiences, to come up with new, brilliant ideas. And because his coaching was based on Buddhism, I would say, in answer to your question, most of my sense of theory comes from Buddhism in one way or another, which is a philosophy more than a religion. And I did another social media. I don't spend as much time on Facebook as it sounds, but I guess I do. I did another post, but this one I thought was really, really important to me, as important as your question is that I felt like, and people responded to it so well, that they felt like I was giving them a more tangible explanation of manifestation. And what I was explaining was that fundamentally, and this is a Buddhist philosophy, but we all know it in real life, that fundamentally you can only recognize what you already know. Just think about the profound nature of that. You can only, if somebody didn't tell you what the color blue looked like, you wouldn't know that was blue. You recognize it because somebody in your life pointed to it and said, that's blue, that's red, that's yellow. Okay, so in our lives, we can only recognize, which is why the What's Going Right journal works. Because if you see what's going right, you're going to recognize more of what's going right. That to me is how manifestation actually works. It's not as woo-woo as it sounds. It's you deciding what do you want to see in your life? What's the success look like to you? So clearly, as I say, in your bones, that you can't deny recognizing it when you see it. Because you're quite like, I battle between what is spiritual in the world, what is real. I am somebody, I like very tangible, real results. I'm very, result driven. But I have to give credit that I got the results I wanted most often in my life because of how I thought about something, not just mindset, but how I set the seed. Sure. Right? I planted the seed for something I wanted, and it showed up as the result I wanted.
Absolutely. Again, I love the law of attraction. I hate the law of attraction as it's talked about, as it's taught, Correct. And everything that I hear. So in our whole half-hour conversation here, what I heard was, everything you talked about was my understanding of the law of attraction.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, because I think it's a very practical thing.
Yeah. I interviewed Bob Proctor from the movie The Secret.
Yeah.
And he said something in the podcast that he said, because I've never said this out loud before. He said, now for those of you who don't know Bob Proctor, he's a big character and behind the movie The Secret. And what he revealed in my podcast, he said that I'm afraid our movie got it wrong. And that's a big statement for somebody to comment about a very popular movie at the time. And what he was saying is that we don't just close our eyes and manifest what we want in the world. He says, what we forgot to explain is the action that it takes, the action that you have to put out, and the visualization, the journey of visualization and really seeing what you want.
And Richard Williams and his daughters, right? Seeing it, working towards it, visualizing it, willing it, like the whole thing is what I think is the law of attraction.
Yeah. Yeah,
there's a lot of work that goes into it.
It is, and but I said, like you said, I'm right with you. I hate the way most people speak about the law of attraction because they just make it sound like it's happenstance and it just lands in your lap. Or at best, you visualize really hard you make a vision board. It's more than that. There's science to it. Like I said, the best example I've ever seen of the philosophy, you can only recognize what you already know, came through the eyes of my daughter, who was about 12 years old at the time, when I bought a Range Rover. And driving down the road with my kids, she's in the car. She's about like 10, 12 years old. And she says, Daddy, before you bought this car, I never heard of Range Rover. Now that we have one, it seems like every other car on the road is a Range Rover.
Right.
Right. Same number of Range Rovers were there before. She didn't notice them. Why? Because she didn't know what it was. She didn't recognize it. That coming through the eyes of a child just grounded it for me to saying, this is a fundamental truth in life, that you have to decide on the results you want in order for you to recognize them when they show up.
And then are you willing to make the choices, then do the things that you need to do to have them, right? Because again, becoming an entrepreneur means that you have to make hard choices and make decisions, which is, again, the premise of our conversation in the beginning was, if you want a lifestyle business, right, there's certain things you have to think about. Like when I wanted to become an entrepreneur, I had to decide, do I want to pay for my own health insurance? Right? Do I want there's just certain things that you got to look at, and do it's just not talked about enough. No. In our circles, it's talked about, in the hustle and grind, which again is the other extreme, which I can't deal with either, right? I can't deal with the hustle and grind and the 10X theory and make sure that you outwork everybody. And if you're asleep at 2:00 in the morning, somebody's outworking. Can't deal with that either. And what you describe is such a practical, spiritual, and sustainable approach. So I appreciate what you bring to the show. And I love the premise of your book. I want people to go to your website, which I'm going to ask you about in a second. There's a video that you talk about some of the stuff in your book, Lingo, about how to really recognize your customers, to really see who your clients are going to be. And the way you describe it from a photographer, because I think it's a talk you give to photographers, the way you talk about it applies to all of us. I think it's brilliant. So how can people find more of you if they can't get enough of what we just did?
Awesome. Well, the assessment we spoke about too, because I think it's a great starting point. The assessment is selfemployedassessment.com. forewarnings.com. It's a custom algorithm. I had it developed for me, and I just like what it does for people. So I welcome anybody to take that, because it enables you six quick questions, but it gives you an understanding of what the gap is in your ecosystem so that you can set about fixing it. So selfemployedassessment.com, and just my website, jefferyshaw.com. I mean, everything that directs you to all my content. Both my books are there. Of course, my books are also available on any online retailer, but they're all over the website, social media. I welcome anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and any of the socials as well.
Outstanding. You've come a long way from selling eggs.
Yeah. But I tell you what, I learned so much selling those eggs. It became some of my most, so one of the stories I tell in the book, I'll tell you real quickly before we part, is that, so what was kitschy about these eggs is that I was selling them door to door, and I was growing up in a town called Hopewell Junction, which tells you everything just by the name. So it was in the middle of nowhere in the woods. But the odd thing about it is that there was this new high-tech startup company starting in Hopewell Junction, which had bought up all the land. This company was called IBM. My father was one of the first 90 employees at IBM. So you had this farm country, high-tech company. In order to have workers, most of the workers came in from New York City. So I decided to sell eggs door to door. But my key point was that they were like farm fresh eggs. I used to go to somebody's farm and pack up these carton of eggs, sell them door to door. But Mark, here's the cool thing. In just my curious brain, I started watching and realized that if I left just a little bit of the chicken poop on the eggs, they actually were more authentic to the customers, right? Because I was cleaning all the chicken poop off because I'm thinking this is gross. But then I decided to test it, and I left just a little bit of the chicken poop on there to the degree that the mom buying the eggs would open up the carton and be like, she'd wince a little bit, but she also knew they were farm fresh. 14 years old. That was the beginning of my marketing. Right? It was the beginning of my marketing and realizing the impact of emotions when it comes to marketing.
And knowing your client, that is brilliant. And by the way, I buy my eggs now at the farmer's market. I cannot eat a store-bought egg again.
Agree.
So Jeffrey, thank you for being here. Thank you for being my new friend.
Likewise. I appreciate
to everybody else. I love you a ton. I appreciate your time and your attention. I want you to have a great rest of the day and go to Jeffrey's website and take some of that goodness and build yourself a sustainable business. Have a great day.